please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Give me 1 second. Oh, thank you. Okay, I will call the March 20th Select Board meeting to order at 5:30. We have one addition to the printed agenda. We have a new business item where we're going to receive some comments from Town Council in regard to the recent litigation decision in the Ward case. So that was not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours to add it to the agenda, and that will just be comments from Council for informational purposes.
Can we ask questions as a board? Or
The board can ask questions, but we're not going to take public comment on it tonight. So other than that, we will accept the agenda as written, and we have minimal announcements. I'll just let you know that this is being audio and video recorded. And then under select board reports and comments, I have a comment. Does anyone else have anything? I just wanted to mention there's been some discussion lately about some of our regulatory boards remaining fully on Zoom, and some requests that there be an in-person option and that we go to hybrid. And we've been discussing that today, and I am hoping that we can move quickly in the direction that but Concom and planning will be meeting in a hybrid manner. There's some scheduling things that need to be put in place. Also, the NP and EDC meeting that is scheduled for next Monday will be hybrid. And I know that there's been some questions about that from various community members, and it will be in this room. What time is that at, Erica? 5? Okay. So other than that, we don't have any follow-up from prior select board meetings. Is there any other public comment tonight for items otherwise not on our agenda for discussion? Topics will be limited to 3 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Veronica Bolchik, and I live with my husband at 22 Arkansas Avenue out in Nantucket. Nantucket is a private road with a little bit over 50 individual domiciles. With new well regulations, as of the beginning of this year, we have a new owner on Arkansas Avenue who tested for PFAS. Their limit came in 3 times the legal Massachusetts limit, which alerted my husband and I that we probably should be testing also. The owner is about 1/8 of a mile down the road. Arkansas Avenue is about less than a half mile. We got our results back last week, and ours are over the double limit. Honestly, I was a bit shocked, although, now as I've gotten to learn a whole lot about PFAS, we probably shouldn't be shocked with our results. One of the jobs that I do is I'm responsible for collecting for our private roads, so I have access to all of our owners, and I felt that it was my responsibility to let the owners know the results that we have. And I'm encouraging them to also test, because I think we need to have some more data points. Arkansas Avenue is well water. On either side, we have South Cambridge is town water, and Starbuck is town water. I think what we are doing right now as a stopgap measure, we are putting PFAS filters in our house for our drinking water. We're not doing a full house, so I'm told that it's safe for bathing, etc., but it's a major concern. We have families with young children, childbearing age. I say my husband and I are in the senior category, but it's a concern. So as we get results, the results do get reported to the Board of Health. but I expect to be back here asking for what's the next steps, because it's a major health concern. So thank you.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Are there any other public comments this evening? Oh, okay.
Hi, good
Hi,
evening,
good
everybody.
evening.
Hi, Hillary Hedges Rayport. So I wanted to come here to comment about the NPNEDC, the ongoing conduct, the open meeting law violation, its scope of authority. So I think many of you know I've taken a strong interest in regional planning and historic preservation, and I've spent really years trying to understand regional planning and all across the Commonwealth, and spoke with lawmakers at many different levels about it, and taken a real interest in that commission. And the reason I'm interested in it is because it can do so much for us by connecting us with the state and bringing grant money and really doing regional comprehensive planning. So I wanted to speak tonight because I'm concerned that there's this kind of narrative happening that this open meeting law violation was just a clerical problem, like because a posting didn't have a name. A member of the planning board commented on Facebook that it was noticed incorrectly, the decision reflects nothing more, and there's a pretty simple remedy. And I don't think that is actually true. I just wanted to explain that, yes, there was a name left off of posting, but there was also an intention to conceal information from the public by meeting in executive session. And I think it's really important that when this is addressed by the commission, and I think this select board also has an interest in that they understand that this commission thought it was appropriate to hear Director Andrew Vorst, Director of Planning, an employee for 30 years, announce his retirement in a closed door executive session. And then they felt like it was okay to not share that information. They heard it in February 2023, and nobody else heard about it until the end of May, after they had already hired his replacement. Which they also did in a closed door session. So I think that's kind of a big deal. I mean, I think that kind of information is something that public bodies are obligated to discuss in front of people. The decision to promote Ms. Snell behind closed doors, they just don't have the right to hide that information. And it doesn't help people of Nantucket to hide that information. And it makes us ask, like, why do we have open meeting law? I think it would be terrible if people thought we have open meeting law because we're bureaucratic, or we have open meeting law because we just want to stamp papers. I mean, the Attorney General says that we have open meeting law because the democratic process depends on the public having knowledge about the considerations of underlying governmental action. So we should care about open meeting law as much as we care about democracy.
Hillary, I don't want to cut you off, but it's 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I have just a few specific requests. I'm sorry that I had to go through all of that education.
Hillary, it's past 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I see others have raised hands.
Can you
probably
put
on the
it
same
in,
topic.
put it,
Yeah, sure.
put your request into an email? That would be fine.
Yeah, well, I have, but I'm asking for hybrid meetings, not Zoom meetings. I'm asking that this commission say it's not
Hillary,
a clerical error.
I already announced at the beginning of this meeting that the meeting will be hybrid on Monday.
Terrific, thank you.
So,
and
but
I'm
I have
asking that the
to-
commission not
I'm gonna go to the
unilaterally
next
hire the
person
director
now.
of Plus,
I'm sorry.
because that's a town department. Thank you.
Melissa Murphy?
Hi, good evening. Thanks so much for taking my comment. It's nice to see you all. I am not a lawyer yet, but I have been reviewing the warrant article and I have some concerns about Article 60. I'm only ashamed to say I haven't been paying attention until now, but it's come to my attention that the in 123 section 4, timeshares are included in the regulations. You all may know that in 2018, when the state implemented its short-term rental tax, and then the Nantucket followed, we were advised by the state, and I should disclose, I am here tonight as the managing agent of properties in Tristram's Landing. There are 26 timeshare properties that my husband and I are the managing agents of. And so I'm concerned that where these units are currently exempt from short-term tax regulations, that this proposed article attempts to ban their ability to rent, these owners to rent their time. Limiting timeshare owners from renting doesn't serve any purpose in my mind. That is, the goal of this article, and further doesn't serve any benefit to the community. These units are already legally shared ownership devices. My units in particular have covenants that are associated with the deeds. So ownership changes in these cottages weekly or bi-weekly, depending on how the covenants spell that out. And so I wanted to bring this to your attention that I'm not sure there's any real purpose to Section J. I would like the town to consider in Section 123.3 to either remove item J as it stands or amend it to create an exception based on ownership, as you did in Section K, where you exempted corporate ownership. Of course, our interval owned time cannot prove through tax records their use because we were exempt from the short-term rental tax. So I would be happy to talk with anyone more about this or to bring this up again during your warrant comments. But where this was such a specific request, I'm not entirely sure what the next best steps should be, and I wanted to bring it to the board's attention.
Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Megan Perry.
Thank you, Dawn. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Excellent. I did want to echo what Hillary had said earlier, and I do appreciate that the next NPDC meeting is going to be hybrid. I think that's super important. I also wanted to ask the select board and town administration to take into consideration the search process for the police chief and the fire chief and what procedures were used for that, and how it differs from what we're doing for the planning director. Additionally, I wanted to highlight, we did an open search for the football coach for the high school. So I don't see why we wouldn't do an open search for the director of planning as well. And I'm sure town administration is going to say that they don't have anything to do with plus, but seeing how the county commissioners do have a representative on NPDC, I think it's important that you guys do something, whether it's give your opinion, write a letter, take part in some of the discussion. It would be great if our elected officials would do that. So thank you very much for the time and have a great night.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments this evening?
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to mention, while we're talking about having boards and commissions go to hybrid meetings, I would respectfully ask that the select board request that the land bank join the groups that are going hybrid. Right now, it's kind of the opposite situation with the land bank, where they're only meeting in person. You can't have any online records. You can't find their meetings on YouTube. I don't know if the select board can compel them, but certainly you guys could request that they have their meetings be hybrid or have a recording of them be put online. If the bicycle advisory committee can be online and on YouTube, certainly the land bank with their resources can do that. This won't come as a surprise to them that I've asked them several times at a couple of their meetings in person to do this. So maybe a little bump from you guys could be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening on any topics not on our agenda? Okay. Next up, we have our new business, and I will turn this over to John Giorgio for the update.
Good evening, Madam Chair. So I'm going to give a brief explanation and overview of the Ward decision, which came down last week. The town of Nantucket is evaluating options to address concerns and implications from that land court ruling on March 14th concerning short-term vacation rentals. The court ruled, in summary, that short-term rentals of a primary dwelling located at 9 West Dover Street in the ROH district did not qualify as a principal use of a primary dwelling in the district, but that rentals could continue as a lawful accessory use of the primary dwelling. The court remanded the matter to the Zoning Board of Appeals. If you remember, this case was appealed from a decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals initially, which upheld the building commissioner. But it's been remanded to the Zoning Board of Appeals for further public hearing on the issue of accessory use, including a consideration whether the use is customarily incidental to a permitted use on the same property, and what is considered a customary accessory use on Nantucket for short-term vacation rentals of residential properties. So we would expect that remand hearing, which has to be scheduled within 45 days of the decision, will focus on examining the record and other evidence to determine whether the use of that property as a short-term rental meets the customary accessory use practices on Nantucket. The town has 30 days to appeal the court's ruling, and the Select Board and Zoning Board of Appeals are expected to meet in executive session probably over the course of the next week or perhaps 2 weeks to discuss next steps from a legal perspective. A public announcement regarding a potential appeal and related concerns will be issued following that meeting. Proposed zoning amendments which would supersede or moot the issues addressed by the court are also on the warrant for consideration at the annual town meeting on May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a few, but I'll let anyone else go first if they.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, John, it's Matt. First off, is customarily incidental on Nantucket for residential, is that defined in zoning anywhere?
No, it's not, Matt. But, and I don't want to get into too much detail because we are in open session and I don't want to compromise the town's litigation strategy here. But if you remember from the Styler decision, the court said that when it comes to analyzing accessory uses, consideration can be given to what is the custom and practice in the particular community. But it's not defined per se.
Right, yeah, I was bringing that up because I'm just worried about, if we don't sort of split the difference somehow, and I think that I think what we had last year split the difference very well, and I think would have, either had both sides a little happy or both sides a little mad that didn't pass town meeting. I think that was close, and I'm worried if we don't split the difference and come up with something that is a equitable, fair path forward, that we're going to keep banging our head against the wall. And so, I don't want to I have other questions that are probably more appropriate, sort of on legal strategy, and that would lead into those questions, which I'll wait on. But I just think I'm worried that one side or the other is going to keep pushing on this. And I wish we had a accessory use article and an accessory use short-term accessory use zoning definition for this town meeting, because I think that's the direction that I think we need to go if we want to get a 2/3 vote. So anyway.
Well, is it too late for us to call a special within the town meeting? I think it's not too late for that, if that comes up. John, I have a question because how does this decision impact the viability of long-term rentals? Because that's also not defined in our zoning bylaw.
So, so Dawn, the courts, you're right, it's not, but the courts, and in particular the Styler case, which was the Supreme Judicial Court, and Judge Vay's decision go to great lengths to describe how a short-term rental, and for everybody's benefit, that's a change of occupancy of 30 days or less, have characteristics of commercial use and not residential use. We haven't seen any court decision, and I would be very surprised to see one that would suggest a long-term lease would be a commercial use. And that's really the key here is Judge Vay found this to be a commercial use, as did the SJC in the Styler decision.
I mean, I'm thinking a little bit more in terms of not necessarily single occupancy like year-round rentals, but there are rentals occurring on the island where, say, a corporation rents for 6 months and there is continual turnover of who's actually occupying the residence, as well as, you know, there are a number of situations where people rent for, you know, 5-6 months for employee housing, and there's numerous individual subleasing.
Right.
So just, I would consider those, you know, somewhat in the same vein as commercial, and just making sure that we cover all of our bases while we're talking about this.
Duly noted. Thank you.
I have one more, if I can. How do we, like, there's a lot of people who've contacted me who are concerned about this summer, and there's a lot of, worry. How do we, ensure people that things are not going to change this summer? Is there anything, John, that we have to do between now and then? And how do we ensure that, that the status quo is the status quo until this is solved? How do we do that?
So I think, thank you, Matt, for that question. I think Judge Vay's decision is beneficial in that regard because, the judge had a bunch of different options based upon his finding, his interpretation of the bylaw, and his decision was limited to a remand to the zoning board with specific, reference to this particular property. And there may be other properties, it's certainly foreseeable, that are in similar situations. But the issue with this decision is essentially you'd have to conduct a case-by-case analysis on a set of very specific facts. And we do not, unless there is another request for zoning enforcement, which would have to be dealt with by the building commissioner and the zoning board of appeals. Ultimately, we don't think we're not, we can't advise obviously property owners, but we don't see any reason to panic with respect to this summer. I think that's the way I would put it. I think the longer it goes on without a resolution, Matt, and I've been saying for a long time now, recommending that you address this in zoning, and I realize how difficult that's been, but you all really need to roll up your sleeves and come up with a solution that can get a 2/3 vote of town meeting. And then this case, if that happens, will most likely be moot.
Yeah, and I feel a little better. That's what I've been telling the people who have been calling me, John. So that makes me feel a little better about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I also say that sometimes we're not the best at enforcement, so it's probably going to be fine. But I think and again, I worry that people are going to be sort of scare tacted into voting full codification. In which case, I think I agree with Dave Iverson in the paper. We'll regret that decision. So I don't know how we get, as a community, I don't know how we get an in-between article, but we really do need to get one. And so, well, I know there's groups working on it. I'll reach out and see if, how close they are, or is there any way to take the short-term rental work group article from last year, possibly, sort of simplify it a little bit and get that back in the hopper. I think we have to have something if we want to have it voted. So, and otherwise, I think we're gutting our zoning and our protections. So anyway, thank you.
Well, Matt, I would just reiterate what Dawn said. You do have control of this situation to a large degree, because you can call a special within the annual. But you have to have a vision and a consensus about what you want to propose if you expect it to receive the necessary 2/3 vote.
Are there any other board questions or comments?
How long
Okay.
do we have to get the special if something in? Libby, do we have till next week or the week after? What's the?
John and I would have to confer on that. Is it 14 days or something like that, John?
Yes, you have to post the warrant for a minimum of 14 days. And then you would have to add in the time it's going to take to print the warrant, and obviously the planning board you'd have to refer it to the planning board for a hearing. The finance committee would want to weigh in. So there are a lot of other steps, and you don't have a large amount of time here to do a special within the annual. So you better get cracking is what I'm saying, if you want to do that.
Thanks, John. To be continued. Next up, we have approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Shall we take the minutes and warrants first?
I'll move approval of the minutes and warrants.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Madam Chair, I was
Oh,
not
yes.
at the licensing meeting, so I will abstain from that
Okay,
particular minute.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, with Malcolm abstaining on those one set of minutes. And then approval of pending contracts, I know that Brooke.
Yeah, I'm going to move approval, and I just wanted to make a comment about one of them. Let me just pull it up here, 1 second. Yeah, it's the seasonal.
Why don't we go to a vote and then make the comment?
I've got a
since
couple
you
comments.
started?
I'm going to
Oh,
vote for
okay.
it too, but I've got a couple
All right.
comments on.
Let's
stuff.
not open the motion then, just withdraw that.
Oh, okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make a clarification. Okay,
Yes, please.
thank you, Madam Chair, for the correction. So I just wanted to clear up that the articles, and Brian can confirm for me, for the funding for the dormitory on Waite Drive, which is this also known as the Nantucket Seasonal Modular Housing, has called by those two names, was Article 17 from the 2022 annual town meeting for the 2023 fiscal year, if anyone wants to go back and look at the language. And the other thing I wanted to clarify is this is not Affordable Housing Trust funding. This is special funding that was raised for this particular project for municipal employee housing. Just to clear that up with the community, because sometimes it gets confusing. So.
And for the public, how many rooms, how much staff is going in there?
It can be up to 70, up to approximately 58, and it'll be a mixture of seasonal, year-round units.
Yeah. I have a couple of comments. One is just, it's interesting, we're spending $34,500 on windows for Island Home, but we're also spending $420,000 to start building an Island Home. Just a comment. The Collins Center, which was at the last one, I want to make sure that all forms of government are being looked at while we have the ability to do it. I understand the contract may have limited, and I think that I've heard that the group that's looking at it believes that they can only look at town meeting versus town council. But I think we should also be considering a representative town meeting, representative government, some other types, other forms. So I would like to, I'll vote it with the understanding that we can, that if we're going to spend the money and have the experts look at it, that they give us, the full gamut.
Madam Chair, I would agree with that. I mean, even though it specifically says council, I mean, the process of evaluating council, you're going to look at all options. You can't not avoid that. So that's what we expect. As Matt said, more individual.
I would agree with that, and also not having a definitive outcome in terms of the recommendation. Tom?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree with Matt and Malcolm that that's what we should do. In our last two meetings, there has been, I wouldn't say disagreement, but it's a question of how to the letter of Mr. Barnes's article we should strictly hew towards. I'm not sure what the will of the majority of the committee is on that, but we have been discussing many different forms, including at 3 o'clock today.
Yeah.
So I can't say that that's absolutely, as somebody who's been to the meetings, that's what's going to happen, but we've been talking about that.
So, wow, we're all talking about this one. I think as a point of process, right, this is a work group that was formed by the select board. And so its mandate is really in our purview, correct? So I would also like to reiterate that I don't believe the strict language of the warrant article should limit the comparison of the options available, and town council being one of them. And why, the whys of why we would discard town meeting and why we wouldn't consider representative town meeting if the outcome is a recommendation for town council or any combination thereof. So I would love to send that message to the group as well.
So I guess that is that.
Yes, I mean, I think that it's imperative that they evaluate everything so they can answer the questions at town meeting. If the ultimate recommendation does end up being to go to a council form of government, but I also think that they shouldn't decide before doing the evaluation that that's definitively the recommendation that they're going to make. John?
If I may, Madam Chair, I've been asked this question, and I interpret the town meeting vote as town meeting directing that this committee study the town council form of government. However, there is nothing in that vote which precludes this committee, this ad hoc committee, from looking at all different forms of, legislative forms of government for the town. So clearly, that committee has the authority to look at everything, not just town council form of government.
Yes, again, I think that it's
Yeah.
that
All right.
they,
Well,
they
I'm-
need to do that to answer the questions on why that's the best form over a mayor or a representative or the existing structure. Matt?
No, and I think it's great that they are able to do that. I hope they will. Town meeting it's gonna be hard to convince town meeting to give up their right to vote anyway. Maybe they'll give it up if there's people from their neighborhood that are going in and speaking on their behalf. But that might be a step, but I'm not sure they'll go to a full step to, you're going to vote 12 people or whatever. I think that might be an in-between that they might accept, but let's let them look at it and try. Thanks.
Okay, with that, can we, did you have another
Madam Chair,
comment?
yeah, I was, Libby, do you think it might be a good idea to wait on this until, because this might, I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but I think there are members on the committee that might think that we were going in a different direction, and if we're saying that, they may have maybe not a change of heart or resign or anything like that, but this may not where they thought it was going. So could it be that we put this on hold for a week? Do you think that would?
Up to you all. We could certainly clarify with them that what town council just said, that while there was a town meeting vote, that is non-binding, and it doesn't preclude them from looking at other forms of government. We could clarify that for sure soon.
I mean, do we vote the funding but hold it pending
Their
this
confirmation.
guidance and their confirmation? Yeah. Does somebody want to
Sure.
make a motion?
Yeah.
Sorry, one of the contracts is coming up, right? So one of your contracts, the one that says for Public Works with Environmental Partners Group, for professional engineering services for Waite Drive, that is going to be held.
So I will move approval less that contract with holding the funding until the committee is given the guidance and concurs.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously.
And just a quick clarification, if I can, Don. I think that I haven't picked one. My direction isn't to do one or the other. My direction is to make sure we look at anything. So I don't have a preconceived notion. I don't think this board has a preconceived notion of what we want or what the town should do. So anyway.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Citizen Departmental Committee requests and reports. This is for the NanTukTuk Pedicab. This is strictly a request to schedule a public hearing for the items listed. We're not going to get into discussing those items tonight. It's just whether we move forward with scheduling the public hearing to discuss those items.
Yep, and did you want Transportation Planner to just review the recommendations that you had asked for?
Sure. If you don't mind, Mike.
Madam Chair, as you know, that the board did seek input from the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Traffic Safety Work Group, and because the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee reports to the Planning and Economic Development Commission, they also developed recommendations. So there's 3 sets of recommendations. There we go. So there were 4 requests. One were to eliminate the or to allow pedal assist bicycles be used. Again, the recommendation ranges from recommending to support those to actually recommending specifics on the electric motor and the top speed for that electric motor to be part of that. Next, please. The next recommendation was to deal with the number of pedicabs. And just to be clear, the statute says that the select board determines what that number is, and right now it's at 2, and the request was to expand that for NanTukTuk to 4 pedicabs. Next, please. And the third recommendation dealt with gratuity, and is that it? My eyes aren't so good. The other recommendation was currently there's a prohibition on having a rate system, and that the system, Pedicab system, ought to operate on a gratuity basis. And there was recommendations for actually having more of a price structure, but the different boards clarified that that should be posted and should be standard for everyone. And then the last recommendation deals with the the service area map. My eyes are so bad. Or is that just blurry? There were different recommendations for how to expand the service area. Right now, it's restricted to downtown and the areas north of downtown and the Jetties Beach area. The pilot program was expanded to include some Mid-Island area locations. The various boards had some input on restricting the Mid-Island area access to avoid Quaker Road, which is heavily trafficked, Prospect Street and Sparks Avenue, keep traffic off there, and to further restrict the access down towards the Milestone Rotary. And the different boards were split on access along Bartlett Farm Road. I believe there's a traffic safety recommendation to restrict that to just Hummock Pond Road to the brewery parking area. And other boards did, I believe the BPAC and the NPDC did vote to recommend as requested access from Hummock Pond Road to Bartlett Farm Market. So different recommendations for those different groups on the map. So happy to answer any questions about those or delay those until you actually decide to schedule a hearing or not. Thank you.
I'm happy to move that we schedule a public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
I have a quick question, Mike,
Sure.
if I could. Amy Baxter brought up lights and things like that. Has that been discussed, or is that I didn't see it in any of the regulations?
It should be on the license requirement that they have reflectors and headlamps, and that's standard operations for all bicycles to have rear
No, I
and
think it was
front lights.
more advertising lights and, and so.
That was me.
that was
And
your-
Mr. Gormley, or Ms. Baxter said that, and Mr. Gormley said that there were not lights on the pedicab itself.
Yeah, I understand, but it's not written in, and, Mr. Gormley will do the right thing. Someone else may or may not. I just think it was just something that came up that there's concerns about, because in a lot of other parts of the world, they are sort of bright and garish and, et cetera. And we might want to keep them in keeping. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the town manager's report, review status of design for our new Island home facility.
Okay, so I've got a little bit of an intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to some others. As you all know, this item has a very lengthy history, this project. Most recently, as the board will recall, at the 2017 annual town meeting, the town proposed the acquisition of property adjacent to Sherburne Commons, plus an appropriation for a skilled nursing facility to be constructed on this adjacent property. Those articles were not approved by voters. Later, in 2018, the select board directed town administration to determine what it would take to construct a new Island home facility at its current site at East Creek Road. Thereafter, between 2019 and 2021, architects were engaged to undertake this analysis. We also held charrettes. Stakeholders were interviewed. Other properties close to the current site were reviewed. Consultation with the Department of Public Health occurred, and analysis of different operating models was conducted. At the board's meeting on August 18th, 2021, the board voted to pursue a new Island home facility at the Sherburne Commons site, with the current Island home to be repurposed for a senior center, and to put forward articles at the 2022 annual town meeting for design for a new Island home facility. Brenda Johnson was engaged to assist with public outreach and to gather and provide feedback and input for a new facility. At the 2022 annual town meeting and annual town election, design and associated funds in the amount of $8.5 million were approved. And in 2023, the design architect and owner's project manager were engaged. Those are SMRT is our design architect. I'll introduce them in a moment. And our owner's project manager is Vertex. We have a steering committee for the project. The people on that group include myself, our two principals from SMRT, Bob Eisenstein of Eisenstein Flaherty Associates. Where did Bob go? Oh, I'm sorry. Eisenstein Flaherty Associates is also our current contractor, assisting with administrative oversight of the facility. Assistant town manager Rick Sears, finance committee member Peter Schaefer, select board member Don Holgate. We also have an advisory committee, which includes the steering committee members, as well as representatives from Sherburne Commons, Nantucket Cottage Hospital, Island Home, Friends of Island Home, and Nantucket Center for Elder Affairs, and the Senior Center. While it has been established that a new facility will be located at the Sherburne Commons site, there is a long-term lease between the town and Sherburne for the Sherburne facility on the town property. That lease is subject to an amendment, which allows for a skilled nursing facility to be located on the property, and it is subject to a cap of 55,000 square feet for a facility. The definition of facility is potentially unclear with respect to the necessary area for parking. That issue is the subject of discussion between the Sherburne Commons Board of Directors and the town. I will introduce Craig Piper of SMRT to present an update. We've got a presentation here as to the design and siting of the facility, and the other people here, Dick Webb of SMRT and Bob, who's right behind Craig, are available for questions and any other input here.
Well, thank you all. I'm pleased to be here today to update the work of a lot of people and a lot of input from the community, as well as the design team and our experts in nursing care. There's a bunch of slides that actually Libby covered here, so we may want to jump ahead. I guess keep going. So we have, so Libby mentioned the past studies that have occurred over the years. that's in the packet. It won't go into detail. If you go to the next slide, Erica, is some of the annual town meetings and special town meetings over the history of the more recent past, and just an update of where we are today. If you go to the next slide, and Libby mentioned the approval at ATM 22 to get the project to basically pre-construction phase, all the design work to get a hard construction number. The town has approved that effort, and we are at that early stage today. And if you go to the next slide, just described what the goals of that annual town meeting effort was to continue the operation of a local skilled nursing facility and creating a more home-like and person-centric care, which goes into the idea of sort of patient privacy, respect, and options for continuing a care with options and choices of spaces and areas to live a full and active life, even in a skilled nursing facility. Next slide, please. As Libby's mentioned, we've met with a number of key stakeholders. We're actively working with the Friends of Our Island Home, many senior local partners, active with the Sherburne Commons community, both the residents, the board, and the abutters that are around there. We have Amy Lee as part of the Nantucket Cottage Hospital as the president, as part of our advisory group, Civic League, as well as we have a meeting coming up with the Nantucket Town Association. And last but not least, active with the staff at Our Island Home, who are living the care for the residents every day, and the great care that they do today in a very old and outdated facility. Next slide. As part of our process for designing a facility, there's been, as Libby mentioned, a lot of community outreach over the years, and the guiding principles for our project are sort of our roadmap and how do we make key decisions. And so we've been developing these and honing these visions and understanding the 5 major principles. So the next slide. Thank you. These 5 guiding principles are sort of our vision. How do we make decisions? How do we compare decisions that we face? So the items across the top: care for the residents and family, make sure the project is operationally sound, it can be managed and operated efficiently. There's safety for both residents and staff members and families. Understanding our future ready, we need the flexibility for the project, and we also want to be sustainably designed. And then not last but not least is the care for the caregivers is ultimately. And then below that are some examples of the things that we're looking at and addressing. So when we're faced with a dilemma, making a decision, we would use these lenses to make key decisions. And we have been using these. Next slide, please. And then we want to be good neighbors to the community of Sherburne, for sure. These were just some of the pieces that we have worked with them to understand the components that we're, as designers, looking at on their behalf. And we want to be open and upfront of the impact of this project on the campus. Next slide. All right, I think this is Bob's section, and we'll let you take over.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Bob Eisenstein. I'm with EFLLC, Eisenstein Flaherty and Associates. And our role has been to sort of be the backup experts for operational, clinical, and programming, and working alongside with the architects in the town. And as Craig and Libby said, we've had countless meetings with all kinds of stakeholders in the community. It's been a long, drawn-out process, and we've also been meeting with the Sherburne Commons. So just to kind of go through some of the planning that we've, from our view, built to repeat, building a modern 45-bed single-room occupancy nursing and rehab facility, replacing the outdated facility. We do want to get into more what we call post-acute, post-surgical patients, which is same as saying short-term rehab. Historically, the building has been mostly long-term custodial care, and the location will be on the east side of Sherburne Commons. Next slide. When we look back at previous, I think the 2017 had a meeting regarding the senior center, and at that time, 75% of survey respondents in the community noted that it was very important to have a skilled nursing facility on Nantucket. The elder care community stakeholders and the town meeting had voted, as we said, to plan and replace the facility in the meeting of 2022. And I think Craig, the architects, have done a really nice job of incorporating the values and missions for marrying the goals of a nursing home into the goals of the architect team. Next slide. The need for single room occupancy, this has come up often, basically according to industry standards across the country. We've learned lessons the hard way from the pandemic that, first thing we would do would isolate patients. So having single private rooms is going to be a way to prevent infections from occurring in the future. And all new construction is being, the recommendation is when and if possible to build all single rooms. It also enhances the resident's sense of privacy and control. Semi-private rooms are all we have right now. I think we have 3 private rooms and the rest are all semi-private. It's very difficult for elder patients to be sharing a bathroom, and the respect and dignity, not to mention the TV clicker, becomes major issues. And it just really promotes patient rights and patient dignity. The Department of Public Health at the local state level and the CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, have all encouraged the use of single rooms in all new construction going forward. Next slide. This is just some research that I put together. Again, just reinforcing some of the major publications, JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine, and others. I don't need to go into them in detail, but they're here as a reference if anybody would like to see them. And this is what's happened. There's a term called de-densification going on in the rest of the state, where 3- and 4-bedroom rooms are now, the regulation is not allowing those at all. And current nursing homes are trying to either renovate or, in our case, looking to build a brand new facility. Next slide. Again, just continuing with some justification and support from the literature on the need for, the other important point is we can certainly don't have to get into the box of a male or female resident needing to be admitted if you have single private rooms. Next slide. There is something from the Department of Public Health that's called the Determination of Need process. We call it a DON process. And we've already been in touch getting ready for this process to talk to the licensing folks as well as the Determination of Need people. And they all recommend the easiest way to get approval through the state system is to request the same number of beds that you currently have in your new facility. A couple of reasons for that. One is if you ask for less number of beds and then you decide you needed those beds later and go back at a later date, it's much more difficult to get an approval for that. Along with the request for the 45 beds to be continued, we are allowed a one-time request for additional beds. That's 12 or 10%. So in our case, it would be 12 beds at a later date, depending on the need. Next slide, please. The population growth, again, from all the research that we've done and here on the island, based on a 2010 to 2020 census report, you've already seen the percentage of elders over 65 go from 11% in 2010 to 17% today. And there are projections that those of us over 65 the increase will go to 25% possibly by over the next decade or so. So again, we're just coming at this from the need to project for not just current, but possible future increases, particularly if the building is not going to be open for a couple of years. We want to make sure we do it right and we do it for the right number of people. Next slide. We have seen to date, I went back and did sort of a 10-year period review, 2013 to 2022, and actually, believe it or not, our island home did at or better than the average on occupancy aggregate year over year. There were some years back, I think 2013 and 14, where they were doing 93 to 94%. On average, it was an 84% occupancy, which is about 38 beds. Currently, the year ending for 2023, we are up to 88%. And obviously, during the pandemic, all the nursing home industry really took a nosedive in terms of census. Some nursing homes went down to as low as 75%. We pretty much stayed pretty consistent in the low 80%, with a low, I think, right during the height of the pandemic down to 75%, but now we're back up to 88% occupancy. Based on the trends that we're seeing, we do see a need, hopefully, to be even increasing census even more. So I'll be happy to entertain any questions later.
Thank you. Next slide, Erica. And you can go one more. So just to give you a sort of a snapshot of the schedule, and I know it's a slide that is hard to read from a distance, but the red line is approximately where we are today. And the first star is the annual town meeting of 24, where just as a milestone in the updating of the community, we would be present in the lobby and to give updates to the community on the project. But the next star is your annual town meeting of 25, and all the steps to get through permitting, construction cost, and licensing with DPH. So there's a lot of work to do. So the goal of today is to make sure we're heading in the right direction before we start making further steps with any permitting agencies or any outward references. So next slide, please. So again, we've also met outside the community. We've also met the internal town departments with pretty much every department, if not once, many times. So we've gotten good feedback. We've had a number of resident and family, staff meeting. That photo right there is us presenting to the staff the updated project. Next slide, please. We also took combination of some facility tours. A key number of us went on some in-person facility tours, and then we also did a number of virtual walkthroughs in similar facilities, some that my firm and I was involved with, and others that are equal in sort of similarity to our island home. Next slide, please. And just a sample option. Some of them are larger scale, some are smaller scale, but we had some real great takeaways and lesson learned from those tours. Next slide, please. So just to get you oriented, this is the existing Sherburne site. The yellow areas are the current cottages, the current buildings on Sherburne site. There's a couple of constraints with the site, just real briefly. One, the big item is, and I can't point, but the double red line that runs sort of a third from the right. You can see that's the current forced sewer main that runs through the site with an easement, thank you, which is scheduled to be, as part of all the other sewer upgrades on South Shore Road. That'll become more of a backup services. So if you go to the next slide, this is going to flash back to 2017, the development of looking at the facility of locating the new R. Island home with the purchase of the adjacent Howard property. And that was a 40-bed small house model, which was not adopted at annual town meeting 2017. As you can see, that was on the west side of the facility. And so we've been focused more on the east side of the campus. Next slide, please. So one of the precedent studies and one of the virtual tours we took was a project that is 45 beds, very similar to our island home. And just to get you oriented, this is in Fort Kent, Maine, which is also a very similar remote community as Nantucket that struggles with the care for their residents in a remote area, but also has staffing problems and staffing limitations. And so the focus on this facility was a combination of looking at all the resident areas and the amenities, but also the focus of the staff and the ability to cover all the residents and be a centralized hub. As you can start to see, this is a model that was very much interested by the staff early on, but locating on our site is really a difficult proposition, excuse me. Next slide.
What do they have, sorry, what do they have in the lower level in this facility?
So this is, great question. This is actually a sloped site. And so the basement is actually a daylit access. And so it works really well to have that lower level entrance for service. All the trash supplies all came in, the staff come in at the lower level, and then they come up. So all the resident services are at one level, but the support areas are at the lower level.
Got you, thanks.
So as I mentioned, these are two options that we are developing. And if you can picture the wings of the building, the one on the right is kind of getting closer to that Northern Maine Medical Center project that I referenced as our precedent, but we start to encroach on setbacks from South Shore Road and a few other components. One thing to mention, we talked about that forced sewer main. We met with David Gray and some of the consultants to see if there's an opportunity to relocate that. Like anything can be done. The question is whether it's worth the expense and the age of those pipes. It was we were strongly recommended to not relocate those forced sewer mains. So as you can start to see, the site becomes relatively limited with the setbacks around the property. There's some buffer restrictions. So the option on the left really came into focus because it meets a lot of the requirements, and it also starts to create some internal courtyards, which from the resident safety perspective, having access that is outside but also secure is a great model for senior living care. So you don't have to worry about fences and gates and that sort of thing for certain residents. So the preference has been leaning to option one, and we've been developing that version. If you can go to the next slide. Oh, there's always been a question about how many stories a facility should be. And having residents on two separate levels is a difficult component. It's done in many large 200-bed nursing facilities when there's staffing at different levels. But 45-bed facility is sort of a sweet spot where, for example, your staffing needs, such as a nurse has to be close to the residents. And so in a two-floor model, you would need two nurses and additional staff to serve on two different stories. So for example, this was a layout we explored of having a two-story facility where the first floor is 15 beds and some of the support spaces, and then the upper floor would be two more 15-bed units for 30 beds. And the presence on the campus and the presence on South Shore would be a very significant tall building. And the staffing requirements are really not ideal. And then the other thing is we're looking at a home-like residential scale facility. It still is a big facility. It's no doubt a 45-bed all private rooms is a big facility, but 2 stories would mean those 30 residents on the upper floor do not have direct access to outside. They would have to go down the elevator to go outside. And then I know the chief is here and I don't want to speak for the fire chief. There's definitely a preference to not have skilled nursing care on the second floor from an emergency perspective. Next slide, please. So one of the preferences, the option one we've been developing, we'll go into a little detail. The one impact on the Sherburne site, or the major impact on the Sherburne site, is the staff housing that is currently in the area that we're proposing our island home. And so the idea of understanding that we need to relocate. And one potential option is to locate it, those housing. So you start to see there's 4 units to the west side towards Myacomet Avenue as just a placeholder. There certainly are options, but if we decide, or if the team decides that the direction is there, there's the one location. So if you go to the next slide, I think we capture that essentially. Oh, nope. All right, so here's sort of a detail. So you've kind of, if you imagine, we've rotated the building to get a better sense of the floor plan. So South Shore Road is now at the top, and the bottom area there, you start to see some green buffer near the parking area. That is the separation of any existing cottages at Sherburne. And the force sewer main that goes through the facility, we need to keep clear for access. We can't build over that, up and over it. And so, but you can have access such as courtyards and those sorts of areas for the residents. So if you look at the center of the facility, right, there's a drop-off main entrance. You come into the facility, and there's a number of areas that the residents have choices. And I'll come to the floor plan in a minute, but just to get oriented. So there's a dining area that has an outdoor area that we can take the residents out into. We have a side that faces South Shore. So if there's a morning sun in the morning on South Shore, they can have coffee on that side of the building. And then there's other areas where residents can potentially have outdoor areas as well as indoor areas. Next slide, please. Talking about the square footage of the facility, I know it's definitely a concern of the impact and the size of the facility. We have been working hard. We looked at a number of various options, but the first floor footprint, the facility footprint, is about 47,000 square feet. So that's what we're looking at right here in the overall, the gray areas. Thank you. There is a portion of the building that's a basement, which we'll show. And we also have the ability to, if there's a desire to have some flexible space in the basement, there's about almost 7,000 square feet of unassigned basement space right now. And the idea with that is we're planning for supply storage, so we can limit how much supplies come in, and they can store maybe more long-term supplies than they currently do now. And so we have some of that already programmed, but the idea is that potentially shelf space, there could be additional storage and equipment and additional bed needs and functions like that. Next slide, please. So I apologize, this is a little blurry, but hopefully you can see it on your screens. The blue areas are the resident rooms, and just to be clear, each resident room is a private room with its own bathroom, and each bathroom in each resident room has a shower. The whole room is a shower, and that allows for residents to bathe and with the assistance of the nursing staff, but it has room for wheelchairs and area to work around the toileting side. One of the other benefits of a single patient room and the location of the bathroom is to allow a great easy access from the bed directly to the toilet. That eliminates resident falls, slips and falls, all those things. So there's a handrail that brings the resident, assists the resident directly to the bathroom. So in a single patient room, that's really important. In addition, a ceiling lift to assist residents who are unable to transfer to the bathroom. And since the staffing issue we've already mentioned, the assistance of an overhead lift that helps move the resident to the bathroom. So overall, the majority of this plan are the 45 single patient rooms. The purple areas in the center are staff support areas. And then the green areas, which are most important, are the staff spaces for extracurricular activities, such as dining, recreation, PT, OT rehab, activities such as puzzles and games, And then we have a number of porches which are kind of connect the wings, which work from a number of perspectives, both from a staffing and the resident care. All those support spaces give choice, and some of them are near, many of them are near where the residents and the staff are interacting. So for example, the kitchen prep area, we have a dining room, but the idea is that the kitchen prep area is open so the residents can be participating in the kitchen activities and the dining activities. The other, one of the bigger goals that we heard early on was the ability to have families come on Thanksgiving and other events that maybe you have a lot of folks coming at the same time. And so the ability that dining and the living room can kind of open up into one area for that flexibility. Some of the other minor details, but they're really super important to the resident care, would be the quiet living room that is more like a library and quiet activity, and then more the living room that's more active, such as a TV or watching a game or a movie. We also have private dining, which is a blended function, which really works if there's a group of residents that just want to get together in a smaller room together during dining, or if a family members is celebrating a birthday or an event, they can have a part of the dining and the residents can really feel special. So all those components get us to this floor plan. One of the key elements is the sort of understanding the way that some residents pace, if you can imagine, just the ability to walk, and we don't want to walk to the end of the hallway and turn around. So the idea of these connected hallways and units is that around the corridors and around the perimeter, the residents can walk and pace, and can kind of experience much of the facility on their own and be safe. That's super important. Next slide, please. I mentioned the basement area. So the area to the right, the white area, is sort of a portion of the footprint. The basement is not the full footprint, as you can imagine. So we have unprogrammed space planned right now. And I think I said, I think it's about 7,000 square feet that we don't need, but it's one of those spaces that you never can get back. So we want to understand, what's the impact and the ability to the what if scenarios. Next slide. So we started putting together some renderings that, again, we have not brought this to HDC or planning yet, but to understand, following HDC's planning guidelines, the impact of our building. Yes, this is a one-story facility. The upper floor is fake windows for access to mechanical space. The idea with that is, following the design guidelines for HDC, we have steep roofs and we're a relatively wide building, so you can imagine how the building's height raises up. One huge benefit of that attic space is a lot of the mechanical equipment that serves a nursing home can be in that attic space, and service can be above the resident rooms and not go into resident room spaces. So all the equipment for service can be in that attic, which is a huge advantage from a disruption to resident care, and services and support can all happen at that attic level, which is a huge benefit and a space that you normally wouldn't need, but it's just a great asset for our project. So this view is from the entrance of Sherburne Commons. If you go to the next slide, it's a sample view of the entrance piece. And so to the left is the dining living room wing, and to the right would be a resident wing. So one thing that with our resident spaces, some residents love to see activity. Some residents would prefer to see less activity. So this building has the variety of looking at activity of people who's arriving. It also has the view of South Shore Drive, or South Shore Road, excuse me, and the activity of what happens on that road. And then we have some rooms that look inward and more of a private courtyard feel. Some of the courtyards that I mentioned, if you go to the next slide, you'll see in this perspective, those courtyards I mentioned are safe and secure, inward facing, but they actually have quite a bit of natural light for, because it's south facing a lot of those units. One of the pieces in the ability, Bob mentioned the short-term rehab, physical therapy, testing different surfaces, stairs, walking surfaces. A lot of those courtyards could have some elements for residents to practice going home, and which is a great piece of physical therapy, having physical therapy combination inside and outside. One brief area in the middle, there's sort of a recessed area. Any of our equipment that needs outdoor air, the idea is that that's inward in the center of the building. And I talk too much about mechanical system as an architect, but that central area to serve all the wings is super important, so to minimize distances. The other component is a lot of the noise generating equipment is away from the resident rooms. For example, backup generator is the only really major noise equipment that would be located to the north or towards the land bank side. And again, these are sort of our progress. As I mentioned, we're still in that early schematic design phase. So there's still a lot of work to do and refine all the components. Next slide. I think I mentioned a little bit about the housing already, so we can kind of skip that. We had, and maybe Libby, do you want to address the question of potentially renting space in Sherburne House for potential housing? Keep going, all right. We've had some discussions about, there's a portion of Sherburne House that has 8 rooms today that potentially could be utilized for staff housing. We have just had brief conversations about that. Some of the rooms could be up to 8 rooms that have their own kitchenette with a common kitchen and dining. There's a lot of infrastructure already there, which is great. Or some of the rooms could be opened up to making larger rooms. Next slide. Wanted to touch briefly on sustainability. When we look at sustainability, there's a lot of, are we designing for people? Are we designing for the environment? Or are we designing for operations? And so what we look at are all the components that go into a project. And again, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week facility is a very important element in operational cost. But also, because it's a nursing home, thermal comfort for the residents is super important. So there's the balances that we're looking at, and we're not at the decision point, but what we started to look at, if you go to the next slide, is comparing it to the existing our island home. So these are some statistics, and I guess my point is we're looking at these. We don't have a hard recommendation, but for example, building EUI is a term in our industry, which is the intensity that the building uses for energy. And the current our island home is about a 99. And that's a significantly above average for a skilled nursing home. There's obviously not, every building is not the same, but the energy use is a component that we look at. And there's different understanding of how the elements are put together. But you can certainly look at this at your leisure. But if you go to the next slide, is really more of the goals of, can we almost reduce our target EUI significantly down? And because we're a new building, there's opportunities that weren't afforded the original building when it was built in the 80s to really maximize building performance. And again, maximizing building performance, but also increasing the thermal comfort for the residents. And so this starts to show some examples of the input of various modes. So there's a stretch goal that that we would be minimally targeting for Massachusetts And so that would be the diagrams on the left of the bar chart. In the middle is some optimal, just simple, what can we do to improve, looking at passive house, looking at some design standards, which create a very tight building, and which is really super important for our care. And then the other animal is, or to the right, not an animal, looking at potentially geothermal PV to really reduce our energy use, which again, the goal is to balance all of these elements, the first cost, and make sure we have the payback. But the ultimate is the moving towards electrical use. We know there's a demand for electricity on Nantucket for sure, but a lot of the systems that are being pushed forward in nursing care require electricity. They're easier to maintain, less maintenance from the operations side. So we want to balance all of those components. And if a PV array will help offset that, which allows to not have as many maintenance because the systems are more electric running, it's a good practice in healthcare. Next slide, please. One goal is also daylighting. And daylighting is just natural light, and this is a diagram of the project that we're at. And currently we're at about 46% daylighting, and we would really like to target more 75%. So we have a lot of work to do, and that may require some active ways to get natural light into the center of the facility. But again, this is just a moment in time, and we'll be working really hard at increasing that amount. Next slide, please. And then I think it's important, Bob started his slide about flexibility, the what ifs scenarios, and we put together 4 quick scenarios of if the bed census changes. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. For example, if the request was to reduce the number of beds from 45 to 30, for example, that red area would be to just not build one of the wings. And that certainly has an impact on the cost of the project. You still would need to provide all the support spaces for a potential adding this wing in the future. So that would be option A. Option A would say we're still all single rooms. And we mentioned that a number of times, that our preference is all single rooms. But the option is, well, what if you decided to plan for some double occupancy rooms? It is currently allowed in nursing care to build double occupancy rooms. Those regulations certainly can change over time, but so just these are 2 scenarios of flexible. If we need to reduce beds, here's an options. If you go to the next slide, the same question, excuse me, goes to, is there ability to expand the building in the future? And so there is the ability to expand to the east. About 6 beds could go to the east. You would need a special permit because you would be encroaching on the setback from South Shore, but it could increase the beds, 6 beds. The next slide. And then one of the things that we built into it right now is we have the ability to size rooms to be double rooms, but be single rooms at day 1. So we have 12 rooms that are sized larger today that could just easily flex to up to 57 beds. But again, we've mentioned the best practice is still private rooms, and the risk is that the regulations may not allow it in the future. Next slide. And again, the maximum that you could build at this facility would be 63 beds if you expanded to the east and also utilized some double occupancy rooms. Next slide. And again, we've mentioned still the preference is single room occupancy, but again, we want to build and provide you options and understand the direction that we have some built-in flexibility for the what if scenarios. The one item I didn't mention is if rooms are designed larger at day one, that could accommodate couples or siblings or friends. So there's a benefit to that is outside of, and I did fail in our program for our 45 beds. 3 of the rooms have some unique characteristics. One is a hospice room that has an adjoining suite for family members to visit. We also have a person of size room, so a little larger, and the bathroom is larger. And then I must be missing one of the other room. Oh, we have another single room that has some adjoining doors that you could connect 2 separate private rooms together so the residents could go between each other if they choose. All right, next slide. I apologize, maybe going too long. I'll go through this area. I'll represent John at Vertex today, the OPM. So back in the end of December, you guys met and voted on going as a construction manager at risk. And that process is on its way. The Inspector General, we hope to hear back soon, which would mean then we can kickstart the idea of getting our contractor partner on board soon. And the first step is an RFQ, which would then follow an RFP process. And ultimately that big component is the construction budget and then total project cost. If you go to the next slide, we're working together both with the town and Vertex and ourselves of understanding all the components of a project. So construction cost is just a portion of the project, as everyone knows, but in healthcare, it's even the ratio between what we call soft cost, furniture, medical equipment, all the pieces that go into construction. The balance is a little bit different, but our goal is that when we know what construction cost is, we've identified all those components, and then the soft cost, the furniture, we understand those components will probably be part of the construction budget or will be part of the construction budget. And the soft cost would really be the contingencies, the insurance, the financing components that potentially are part of a total project budget. So I think that it wraps it up. Information. Oh, I guess to ask. One more slide. So again, we've kind of updated, the goal is from the request to plan a 45-bed single resident facility on the Sherburne campus. If you go to the next slide, really we're just looking for direction of our steering committee has made their recommendations, and we're looking for confirmation on the areas in the blue area, if possible, of the 45-bed single occupancy room. There's no outpatient services in this building. This is just a nursing care facility. The idea of locating it on the east side of Sherburne Commons site, and then understanding there's an impact to the Sherburne housing that is there, and that the project would bear the cost of making Sherburne whole, both in their existing facility or existing buildings that are there. There are also planned 2 additional facilities that they were permitted for that they didn't build. So it would be the idea of our project, or this project would bear the cost of balancing the Sherburne housing. And then the other areas we're in the middle of, and then the next areas are in process. So with that, I believe question time.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say the committee and the whole team here has just been really thorough and really thoughtful in this whole process. And we've been meeting practically weekly and starting to do the outreach as well and get the feedback. But looking forward to hearing what my fellow board members have to say on the presentation. Brooke?
Yeah. So thank you to everybody who's participated, from the steering committee to those in the community who have participated in input sessions and so forth. This is a big job, and we've been around this a few times as a community, and I'm really impressed by this design. And the thing that I loved about it was the center courtyards, where I think folks with memory issues can go and be outside and not not have to worry about wandering. I thought that was really creative. And I was going to ask the question about rooms big enough for couples, and you answered it before I could ask it. So I think that's brilliant. That sometimes that's exactly what's, I mean, if I could be in a nursing home with one of my sisters, I don't know, might be cool, right? So I think it's beautifully thought out. And I would be happy to support the direction we're going.
Oh, yes, I'll take public comment. Just state your name at the mic, please.
My name is Diane Egan. In 2022, I was one of the ones that stood up at the town meeting. And I am so happy that this is not put aside. We need this so desperately. We need it away from the water. People have no idea how bad it is down there. And my sister was there, for instance, and a lot of people that I've known through this lifetime of mine. I'm a native. And I thank you people. I agree with Brooke, and I hope this gets started and not set aside. And I've been waiting for 2 years to hear this and saw it today on my Facebook, and I'm here. And thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks for coming tonight. Other board members? I mean, they're looking for some direction on those points too.
Well, I can give a little
Malcolm?
direction. Well, I think that was just a fabulous presentation, and obviously a great work, and you've really gone into the details. I'm quite impressed. As one that did spend a few years working in a nursing home at a time, I appreciate the difficulty of that environment. I guess the obvious question is, it's wonderful, we probably need it, is I'm still waiting for the cost. Because at some point, even we want lots of things sometimes we just can't afford. So how I ultimately come down on this will be, what's its cost, and what will it involve other things that we can't do, and what's the priority. But so far, I'm very impressed with your work.
Yeah, I'm similar. It's hard for me to make a decision. I think we need it. I think it's great. And so that's one question. Of the people, we had 85% occupancy now. Of those 85%, do they all require this level of care?
Bob, you got to come to the mic.
Yeah. Because I know when we were considering the another model, it was partly based on, we had a third of the people didn't need that level of care. Are we all at this level of care now?
At this point, anybody that's remaining in the facility has to be certified as what they call skilled nursing level of care, whether it doesn't matter what payer mix. Medicaid the same, Medicare the same, private pay the same. If not, they would be discharged. The change is we hope to recruit more people that will come and then be discharged home. So that's the goal with the single rooms. That will increase our capability of doing that.
That's great. Another question, will any of these changes require union bargaining? Has that all been sorted, or is that going to be required?
Do you want to answer that, or I can?
Other than we're moving to a new facility and working conditions are likely to be greatly improved, that would be more of a discussion with the union. I don't know that they would need to agree to anything. As the board knows, we have negotiated language in all of the union contracts pertaining to housing. So that really is off the table, I would say.
Well, that's my next question.
I think with the way this is modeled, I think the only real staffing increase would be custodial.
Is there any, are there any savings that are going to happen between Sherburne Commons and us with laundry and other facilities and that type of thing? Do we hope that happens?
I think we're open to that, and that's a discussion with Sherburne. They are different facilities, right, and there are regulatory requirements that the nursing home will have that Sherburne does not. Right. And whether or not those are compatible, I think can certainly be explored. And like I said, we're very open to that sort of thing, but it's going to come down to probably the regulatory requirements.
Yeah, because that was also some of the things that we talked about in the previous rendition is what, and the other part is housing. Like it's great, we could have the nicest building in the world, but if we can't staff it, where do we stand? And so it's nice to see next door with 8 or 10 rooms. That's great. Are there other options? I saw the upstairs, and I know you want to put, I was thinking you put some employees in there. I know you want to put, equipment there, but, or make sure it's strong enough so something can go on, the second floor can go on part of it in the future, et cetera. Those are the types of things that might be like smart to spend a little bit of money on now, So anyway, that was my other thing, is I want to make sure that operationally we have enough people to do this, and I'm not, I think, it's going to be a lot of money, and we've had some tough votes in the past, and I think those votes are going to get a little tougher. I know emotionally we'd all like to vote it, but then when people can do it quietly at the ballot box, they might not. And so I think the sooner we can do it, the better, and the more we can sharpen our pencil to bring it in as a really nice facility, as affordably as possible, that would be great. I have friends on the other side, and people are bidding a little lower now. Things are changing in the economy, so we may be timing this, like just to assume everything's gonna be double again in 2 years. It doesn't seem like that right now. I've got a couple of buddies with large construction companies, and they're saying it's gonna they're gonna be a little tighter, and the prices are coming down a little bit. So our timing may actually be good in that regard. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have one more question. This may be premature, but since we really don't know what the construction costs are going to be, can we anticipate greater operational costs? Because we're essentially having the same number of patients, and we're assuming the same amount of insurance coverage, et cetera. But this is probably going to be a lot more expensive to run, yes?
No, well, it is a significantly larger facility. So, but the staffing requirements of taking care of the 45 residents would stay the same. The idea of what we see in a lot of facilities that grow is the concern of maintenance, because there's more square footage to maintain. But the idea is that, a lot of our materials, the idea of what we select, the very durable materials, soft on the touch, that are easily maintained, would also offset that concern. But the idea of, from a staffing perspective, the idea is that the same staff that are working there today in tight, cramped space will do their same good work in a new facility.
That's one.
If I just follow up on that, as I understanding, there are some proposed federal regulations that will increase the requirements for nursing staff in homes. So we be at a point where
That's an excellent question. So
we're usually not able to staff adequately all the time, or we're going to have to end up reducing the amount of beds that we have in an expensive facility, and will operational costs get going? These are questions before I can really get 100% behind it, I have to get a sense of.
So just to take them in sort of point order, the reason we would like to keep everything on one floor is, you're absolutely correct. The regulations now call for a nurse to be on staff particularly on evenings and nights. And if you have 2 separate floors, yes, it would increase staffing. But by regulation, having the one floor design that the architects have shown, that constitutes one nursing station. So regulatory wise, we can still staff it just for the one nursing station. The other thing to point out is, actually, from a staffing perspective, the good news is the nurses' aides, all the department heads, all those folks have been stable for years. They're all town employees, and they've been, the issue is the licensed nursing staff that we have difficulty, and the housing hopefully will take care of that. Operationally, like what Dawn said, other than maintenance costs and some of the fixed costs, like obviously utilities and things like that may increase. But as far as actual staffing, we're not planning for any additional other clinical staff because of the design. So it should be okay. Again, we can't predict any other changes, but given everything now, it shouldn't be any additional staffing expense.
Now, I was going to mention the utilities, though. Although it's a larger facility, it's going to be ridiculously more efficient facility. So we may actually have a savings.
I guess
Good.
just one last thing on cost. So where we are in our timeline, we have engaged an independent cost estimator, and we are wrapping up what we call schematic design in the next couple of weeks to get that process started. But really, ultimately, once we have the construction manager on board, we'll actually have the ability to do a reconciliation between an independent estimator and the construction manager who will ultimately build it. So we'll start to really hone in, I would say, hopefully, if let's say we have our construction manager, we're our March, maybe by the end of May, early June, we should have a good time to come back and give an update of where we are on the estimates of where we're heading today.
So we're not bringing this forward till next ATM. Yes, Tom.
I just want to say quickly, thank you for the great presentation. That was very, very thorough. And the work group's thoughtful considerations of many options. I think looking forward to seeing more on the sustainability principles. I know you're kind of just getting started on that, but I thought that was exciting for a potential future facility. And just one quick question about the options around double occupancy and what DPH might say and the approval. You kind of talked quickly about that they prefer single, and I'm sure there'd be thoughtful considerations between you and the work group, but just sort of what your thinking is on that.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And again, today we are allowed to build double rooms. There's it's just the idea of if we build some extra large rooms for that flexibility, there is a chance that the regulations could change when you go to ask for those. As Bob mentioned, if you ask for additional beds in the future, just to convert those rooms, there's a chance that may be not allowed at that time. So for example, a skilled nursing facility is a hospital, the same equivalent as a hospital from a life safety perspective. So the construction type of the building is steel construction. It's non-flammable construction. Hospitals do not allow double occupancy rooms, but skilled nursing facilities are still at the ability to have double occupancy.
Just one other consideration in favor of the single rooms is on the revenue side, which we haven't really touched on yet. We're going to be producing some detailed pro formas. What we're hearing from our colleagues off island when they've converted from semi to private, it's much easier to market it if you think of the customers that we're going to try to recruit to come here. Short-term rehab, people that are higher functioning, they all prefer to have private rooms. So it's kind of a win-win it's not mandatory right now, but to Craig's point, we're looking at future planning. So for a variety of reasons, I just wanted to also mention the revenue potential idea as well.
I'm Peter Schaefer. I'm the representative from the Finance Committee on this committee. Okay. And I just wanted to say, I had never even been into our island home until I got on the committee. And I went over there a couple of weeks ago and got a tour. And the one thing that impressed me, and not only from that, but from people coming up and talking to me about it, is the staff. We have a staff there that's terrific. And they're in a crappy building that if we don't do something, it's not going to be here. We'll have nothing on this island, and people are going to have to go off island for care. And we really are looking at every option that we can do affordably in this building that will make it a comfortable place to go. And we have people now that need nursing care that go off island or have in-house nursing care because they don't want to go to our island home because the building is the building. But any of those people that do go there, the comments on the staff are really, really outrageous. They just love them. So they're doing a good job with what they have. Imagine what they can do with a nice facility.
Brooke.
I'm just curious, and this is a little bit in the weeds, but if we built the facility with the larger rooms as proposed, that could be double rooms, is there any sense in asking for those additional beds now? So that they're permitted as such now while they're allowed, even if we don't use them that way? Is there any reason not to do that, I guess, from a regulations and requirements, like adding 5 beds or
From
something.
our
would-
discussions with the representative, it's an open-ended, it's the town's decision, frankly. If that were the decision of the town, I don't see why that couldn't be possible. We can double check that with them, but we'll be going through that permitting process with all of them. We can certainly confirm it, but I think the answer would be, I don't see why not.
What's the provision that you've mentioned before about you can add up to 12 if you can demonstrate the need?
Yeah, you're allowed on any building, you're allowed a one-time, either 10% or 12-bed extension through the determinant of need process. And what they were telling us is that the timing of that is really up to the client, so.
That was kind of the thought between
Exactly.
why 12 rooms are
Bigger, yeah.
oversized.
I mean, my thought is if it doesn't automatically trigger you because you're licensed for more beds to having more staff and the cost going up, then why not? Just feels like, because then if a couple wants to come and be in a room together, you've got a room that's licensed for it.
So we have talked about that, and we've talked about the number of beds quite a bit. There was some feedback at a recent abutters meeting about the size of the facility and some concern that it is overpowering and too large. And we're very, very cognizant of that. And we obviously do not want to construct a facility which is never full. Yet we're trying to be cognizant of Sherburne Commons concerns, neighbor concerns, the future elderly who are going to need skilled nursing care population numbers. So it's a balancing act. And I think we're pretty comfortable now with the 45 bed, maybe even 40, but we don't want to get locked into something that's going to be difficult to maneuver later. But again, we also are very much aware that it's an expensive project. It would probably be the most expensive project yet that the town has undertaken. So, there's that.
In addition to that, I mean, part of the thinking around not including like housing on the second floor, or not including housing on site except for the potential option of whether we can rent that wing of Sherburne Commons from them for travel nurses is to not add any more to what we need to do here and provide additional town employee housing that we're working on sort of throughout departments off-site, including, potentially starting to build along Tacoma here on all those lots that we own, which would be a very easy commute.
So the action we need to take is to affirm the direction? Is that?
I
what
think
is being asked
that
for?
would be nice.
Okay, so I would make a motion to affirm the option that's been selected and authorize the group to move forward toward getting us some numbers.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you.
And I
Thank you.
think that, Brooke, that was a smart suggestion. I'm sure the group's talked about it, Brooke, but that's a smart suggestion to, sort of have a pre-existing allowance to a certain number and to build a few bigger. I think that's smart. The existing building was non-conforming the day we built it. We built it with the rooms too small even for those days. So I think looking ahead now, is a good idea.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to not do the minimum standard,
I know.
but not go overboard either.
No.
Well, thank you all. Next up, we have select board reports and comments. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, we voted. Okay. Preliminary review of select board comments on the May 7th, 2024 annual town meeting warrant articles. Just for clarification, I was cleared by ethics to sit specifically on the ward topic earlier, but I am still recusing from any broad discussion that would impact my work of short-term rentals. So we can discuss any other warrant articles. I'll leave the table if you want to discuss comments on short-term rental articles. In the meantime, I just want to clarify something that I said at the beginning of the meeting. We've talked to planning about going hybrid, but we actually have not spoken to Concom yet. So we were registering a request that we move towards hybrid and scheduling for these regulatory boards because we've had many requests to move in that direction. But I got a little bit of feedback that they were blindsided as I was sitting here. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I hope that they will be able to organize that because I think it's important for community access. But they may need a little bit of time to coordinate.
So with regard to the warrant, you had a joint meeting last week with the FinCom and the Planning Board to go over all of the motions. And I think the thinking here was if not to maybe, I mean, it's just a suggestion, not to go through every single article as we did last week, but if any board members have specific articles that they might want to comment on, that you just call those out and discuss them. You have this on your agenda again next week, but next week it's got to be finished up so we can get this off to the printer and the mailer.
Okay. Is anybody wanting to bring anything up?
What do we think about the wind articles 77 and 78? I know they've been recommended against. Do we want to emphasize that or no?
I mean, I don't particularly need
You don't think it
feel
matters?
the need if
Okay.
FinCom has made a recommendation we agree with.
I mean, I think we should have a conversation about the short-term rental articles next week, but I want to wait for the sessions that we're going to have with the attorneys between now and then.
Okay.
Do we want to comment on the number 80, year-round restriction? Or do you think it's fine?
It's the motion is to adopt, right?
Well, on 80? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth reinforcing this as our commitment to housing.
That's what I was,
Yeah.
I know, it's,
Matt, did you have any language?
I don't, I was chugging through it this afternoon, trying to figure out which ones do we want to talk about and are there any we need to do? So I wasn't writing comments yet.
Just a suggestion, would you want to say something like, the board supports the finance committee motion, which is to adopt its strong goal and focus area, something
Yeah,
like this,
something
of the
like that's
strategic
fine,
plan?
yeah.
It's
Yeah, just, I
it
think just
aligns
something
with
simple.
our number one strategic planning goal.
Yeah, I just think sometimes it can't hurt, you know?
Madam Chair, I also believe that was a unanimous vote of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as well. Could include language with that if I am in fact remembering that correctly.
Now I'm changing my mind.
I mean, we can just go with the FinCom recommendation and then could speak in favor of it if needed at town meeting as well. But if you want to reinforce it, that's fine.
I agree with Matt. I think reinforcing it makes sense. So I mean, something along the lines of what, I mean, I can come back with something specific, or Libby, do you want to just propose something for next week and we can vote on it next week? That'd be great.
I mean, are we going to use the normal language of just the select board supports the FinCom Finance Committee motion?
Yeah,
Or you
that's
want
fi- I
something
think-
more than
I
that?
think-
I think that's fine.
Just I think we wouldn't mind some blurb about it aligning with our strategic plan
Yeah.
goals.
Yep.
That's fine. Number 92 was the department heads reporting to Libby. Is town council still on? I wanted to sort of, if not, I can ask next week, just why was that not, you know, in proper form or et cetera? I remember him saying it, I just don't have it. Yeah, I think, I'd like to have his why he recommended as he did. Because in some ways, I agree that, that I think the, the person running Plus, Libby and Human Resources should be involve hiring. And I don't, so that shouldn't be hired by a volunteer board. And so I think that the goal here, I think is a good goal that Megan Perry had here, but I'm not sure, I think the goal is smart. Can we amend it or, anyway.
If I may, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, so
Yes, John.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
thank you. So I think that the issue with this article is not so much what Matt is talking about. That's obviously a policy that the select board can pursue. It's more of a technical nature as to the way this charter amendment is worded. It appears to, I think there are some internal inconsistencies with this charter amendment, and it would appear to potentially affect employment contracts with other department heads, not necessarily the plus department head. And so I think if the board was interested in supporting this conceptually, it would require some substantial work to revise the article, or perhaps you could look at this as something you might want to consider doing in the future, and have us draft something that would actually work.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Brooke.
When we met jointly with the NP and EDC on the memorandum of understanding, we did agree that there would be a review of that MOU. Does this fall sort of under that in some way as a sort of personnel policy and how that MOU is interpreted potentially, as opposed to a charter change? I mean, maybe that's through you to John. I mean, that the outcome of that meeting was sort of to form a chairs and vice chairs committee to keep an eye on the MOU over time. And maybe that's part of a conversation. This might be part of that conversation. I don't know.
I just have a question,
Yes.
Madam Chair, for John. The recent agreement with the commission about where it says in there, Libby has administrative authority over the personnel. Does that mean, in fact, that she would have to approve hiring? I mean, do we since already have this agreement in place based on that agreement?
So the hiring, the current structure is that the director and the deputy director, and I believe the transportation coordinator, are actually employees of the commission, and they're hired by the commission. If you wanted to go in a different direction, I would suggest that perhaps you have further conversations with the planning commission along those lines. But that doesn't, I don't think you're ready for this town meeting to propose a charter amendment to put that into effect. This particular charter amendment, as I've said before, I think is flawed in many respects and would probably create unintended consequences that you might live to regret.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Okay, a follow-up question. I'm still confused. With my original question was about our MO agreement with the commission. If it says in there now that Libby has the administrative responsibility, wouldn't it mean that if, for instance, hiring the planner, for example, would have to go through the usual administrative processes of the town? Am I stretching that, or is that?
I would not read the MOU to require that, Malcolm. It's more the day-to-day administration of Plus and the the director and the deputy director, and making sure that they're in compliance with the employment rules and regulations that apply to other town employees. But there's nothing in that MOU that would cede the appointing authority to anyone other than the Planning Commission.
Well,
Would it just have to fit within the approved budget?
Well, yes, of course, yes. Because those
Because
positions,
it's not an enterprise fund like some of the
no,
other.
it's ultimately, the funds are included in the town budget to pay those salaries.
Malcolm, I'm sorry, did I cut
No,
you
no,
off?
I guess I made my point. I think that the next agreement should include that in fact hiring and so forth is done in the usual process of hiring other high-level personnel in the town.
So maybe something, if you wanted to make a comment on this, something to the effect, rather than amend the charter, the select board would recommend continuing discussions with the Planning Commission regarding the hiring and administration of employees in the Plus department, something like that.
Brooke?
I don't think I'm ready to comment on this article, but I do think that there's a lot of concern in the community around the dynamics between town administration and the planning department and NP and EDC. And I just think it's worth an open and robust conversation around the benefits either direction of how it's structured now versus how it might be structured otherwise. And I would like to learn more. So I think it's as an exercise to just rethink or review this in light of public concern is probably a worthy conversation for this board to have.
Yeah, I brought up, in our joint meeting, I brought up a lot of these concerns. I talked about the structural issues that I believe we have, because it's, even if, you know, I think it's impossible to do all the various tasks that are assigned there. And so, you know, with the structure we have in place, the way it's organized, I think there's bound to be departments that are not able to have the attention they need, HTC being one of them. And, you know, and so I brought a lot of that up. I didn't leave with the impression that this was a, you know, there was a burning desire to, you know, change over there much, or to, you know, to make things clearer and better. I got the impression that, you know, we're going to keep going, and the chairs and co-chairs will talk, but nothing's really wrong. That was the impression I got. I felt like I was talking to myself, so I feel as though, you know, anyway, I didn't get the impression that this was something that was at the top of the pile. So
I think this is getting a little bit beyond the discussion on comments on these warrant articles. I mean, this is a worthy discussion, which we could bring up as a proper agenda item. And just, I will note that I was contacted today about being interviewed for the HDC review, which I know that everyone's been concerned about what the next steps are there. I think one other board member, might be you, Matt, is going to be
I was
contacted.
contacted too, and I think that's a really good step, because that was we kind of botched that. So this would be great to have a chance to,
Yeah, but I don't think that it's really in order for us to make a comment on this particular article, but I think that we could have further discussion going forward about, just clarity on the entire hiring process across the board. Because, there are other enterprise accounts, quasi-town entities like the land bank. I mean, there's the water commission, the airport commission. There should just, be some continuity maybe across the board, and it's a policy discussion
Yeah,
for a
Madam Chair,
future
I'll
time.
encourage at some point we dedicate significant time to that issue.
Okay. Back to the warrant. Anything else? Okay.
No, I think that's all I had.
Okay, are there any?
And I'm
oh,
still dreaming of an accessory use, so that when we get to talking about this, we have something that, that covers existing people.
well, I'm
and-
gonna have to
yeah.
stay out of that, but if
I
you
know.
guys want to do it, you're gonna have to move expeditiously.
I know, and I don't know how it's gonna happen, but I'm dreaming.
Are there any committee reports?
Move to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Good night.